So good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thanks so much for being here. Thank you for inviting me here to give the second lecture, the second chapter of the book, The Good News. As I think many of you know, we are doing like every month, starting last month. Every month we are doing a lecture from one chapter of the book, The Good News. This book, it brings some stories from Jesus and from the apostles that we don't know by reading the gospel. And that happens because, as Fred said in the first lecture, because of Humberto de Campos. Humberto de Campos, he's the spirit. We don't know if he's actually now in the spirit realm or not, but when he wrote this book, he was. And he got all these informations by going to some classes of the gospel in the spirit realm. So they have some classes where we can go, we can watch, we can learn, and that's how he brought all those teachings, all those stories through the hands of Chico Xavier. So last month, Fred talked about the introduction and the first chapter. Today I'm talking about the second chapter. And just to let you know, I'll try a different approach. And that's why, because Humberto de Campos, he was a politician, he was a writer, and he was also a journalist in Brazil. And as I am a journalist too, I love very much his style and his text. And one of the things that I know from his writings is that he has this journalistic style when he writes, because it's, for example, we have here, imagine we go to a class in the spirit realm, I don't know, 1 hour, 2 hours, how many hours, he get to know these stories, and then he brings it to us in 5 pages. So he needs to be like, to be able to put only the essential information there, to summarize it in a very journalistic way, because it's very easy to read, it's very, it's very good, at least for me. I like very much his style. And so I try to bring like a journalistic approach, at least in the beginning of this lecture. That's why I will begin with these 5 W's. And it's going to be a very interactive lecture, so I want you to read with me. I'm going to ask some questions, and you can help me anywhere. If you have any question, just raise your hand or just say it out loud. We are here to learn together. And so I brought the 5 W's. Does anybody here know what it is? Have heard about it? Yeah. And usually when you are writing an article, when you are writing a story as a journalist, we have to answer those 5 questions. The who, why, what, when, and where. Usually we do that right in the beginning of the text, because it's easier for the one who is reading to get to know what we are talking about. So in the whole story, we need to be able to answer those 5 questions. But usually in the beginning of the text, we have to know what are we talking about, who are we talking about, why, when, and where. So I will bring those 5 W's here for us, and I will try to answer those 5 W's, and then we are going to see how Humberto de Campos brings all these teachings to us. So the first one is about who. So this is the story. The name of the chapter is Jesus and the Precursor. So the first, let's see who is in this story. The first one is Jesus. We are talking about the gospel. We are talking about the time that Jesus was here on earth. So the first person that we know is going to be there is Jesus. And then I want to ask you, when you think about Jesus, how do you imagine Jesus? How is Jesus for you? Let's see. Let's everybody imagine Jesus right now. When we pray, many times we say that. How do you see Jesus? If I could bring Jesus here, if he were here, how would he be?
White tunic.
Long hair and beard. I visualize Jesus as a beautiful light radiating this incredible magnitude. When I'm praying that I'm really picturing that, I cry sometimes because I just feel all this incredible love that you can put in words.
So usually some images that we have, like we have this light, as you said, we have the white tunic. Those are some like images of Jesus that we have. But let's imagine we are in October. If today were December 21st, we are close to Christmas, and to the same question. We are close to Christmas Eve. How do you see Jesus now?
Santa. As Santa.
Yeah, what are you celebrating Christmas? Yeah, so we could see Jesus as a baby. So here we have two images of Jesus as a baby. But in this story, Humberto de Campos doesn't talk about Jesus as a baby. He doesn't talk as Jesus as the 33-year-old man. But he talks about Jesus as a teenager or a preteen. In this story, Jesus is only 12. And it's interesting because usually when we read the gospel, we don't have much information about Jesus at this age. Only two of the books, they bring one passage from Jesus when he is 12, when he is a preteen. But usually we don't have much information about that. So it's important for us to see that this is the Jesus we are talking about, this young boy. And this is the Jesus, this is the story that Humberto de Campos is bringing to us, because that's one of the main efforts of this book, to bring some stories that we have no idea that happened. So we can get to know how some more things that usually we don't have in the gospel. So the first two here, the first one is Jesus. And then with Jesus we have Mary. Who is Mary? Jesus' mother. We have Joseph, Jesus' father. We have Isabel. And we have John, who is Jesus' cousin, son of Isabel. So we have, what you have here, we have a family. So we have Mary and Joseph with Jesus, and we have Isabel with John. Where are they? They are in Nazareth. Nazareth is the city where Jesus lived. And this is how Humberto de Campos talks about the city of Nazareth. He says that Nazareth, with its landscapes that is among the most beautiful of all Galilee, is perhaps the most beautiful corner of Palestine. So here, Humberto de Campos tells us a little bit about Palestine, and it's about Nazareth. It's interesting because in the book 2,000 years ago, Emmanuel, who lived at that same moment, at that same time, he also brings some descriptions of Nazareth, and he also says it's one of the most beautiful places at the time. So we can imagine, like Humberto de Campos is telling us, for us to have a picture of the place where Jesus lived. And where in Nazareth? He talks about Mary's humble little house in Nazareth. And this is actually a picture of some researchers. They said that this, oh, what are you doing? Oh, sorry. Now here. Here is a picture of a place that, according to some researchers, they think this is actually where Jesus used to live. So it's a very humble, rocky house. It's a small city with rocky streets, small houses. So this is where Jesus lived at that time with Mary and with Joseph. And when does it happen? As I said, Jesus was 12 years old, and it was, they say here, it was after the famous introductions of Jesus to the doctors in the Temple of Jerusalem. So this story we have in the Gospel. So, for example, Luke, he says that Jesus, when he was 12, he went with Mary and Joseph to Jerusalem, and they had this introduction to the doctors of the law in the temple. So that's when it happened. So we already know who is in the story, where the story happens, and when in time the story happens. And what's happening? So what do you think is happening? We have the whole family there together. What do you think they are doing together? Why they are together?
Celebrate.
What else? Everybody's shy today. So Isabel and John the Baptist, they visit Mary. So it's just a visit. Like Isabel, Mary's cousin, she goes with her son, 12-year-old son, and go to visit Mary. So we can see how many times didn't we go to our cousin's house when we were kids as Jesus, or the ones who are mothers here went to our cousins or to someone in the family to visit them and to talk. So it's like something normal. It's not something like they're not talking about something out of this world that happened. It's not like an event that they were there together gathering. No, it was just the two of them visiting the three of them. And why does it happen? Why Humberto de Campos tells us this story? Because he says that the two mothers entertain themselves with intimate conversation, affectionately confiding their dearest motherly concerns. So that's what's happening, why it's happening. Mary and Isabel, they are talking, they are like sharing their experiences. And what is very important, whoa, what did I do here? 1 minute. I still don't know how to deal with that. Now we're back. So they're talking about motherly concerns. Who here is a mother and who here has concerns? What are the concerns that a mother may have? What do you think? Come on, mother. No, you don't have any concern.
Concern-free. Their well-being, what they're doing well.
So usually the mothers, they are concerned all the time about their kids, aren't they? And it wasn't different with Mary and Isabel. And it's interesting because Humberto de Campos, he tells here, one of the things that he tells here is that the birth of those two children, they came with remarkable events and surrounded by unusual circumstances. What are the circumstances that we can say? What do we know about the birth of Jesus and the birth of John the Baptist? What happened before? What happened to Mary and to Isabel? It wasn't something normal, like the two of them. Mary was married with Joseph, and then, okay, I want a baby. They became pregnant, and the same happened to Isabel and to her husband. No, it wasn't like that. For example, Isabel, she had already tried to have babies many times, and they couldn't have babies. She was already old for the time to have babies, and then the angel came to her husband and said that they were going to have a baby. And that's how it happened. That's when it happened. And the same we know happened to Mary. The angel came to Mary and said what was going to happen. So they already had an idea. It was unusual, of course, because I don't know if it happened to any of the mothers here, if an angel appeared to say that they were going to have a baby and who the baby was going to be. But usually it doesn't happen so often. So it is unusual, and it is also brings to us about, okay, they have those concerns, but they already have an idea about who they were going to have as children. So imagine if some angel came to me and say, oh, we're going to have this kid, he's the Son of God, I'll say, okay, that's great. The first thing we are going to think, that's great, I don't have to have any concern, it's going to be a perfect kid. So why would they be concerned about if they kids, at least Jesus was perfect, he is perfect. Why does Mary have these concerns? So can someone read as Mary for us?
Sure.
Sure. Come on.
I worry constantly about his fate.
So now we know she's worried about his fate, about Jesus' future. So it's not she's not worried because he is misbehaving. She's not worried because he's going to school and his grades aren't the best one. He's not. No, she's worried about his fate because, of course, she knew who Jesus was, and she was worried about that. And let's remember who was Jesus or who is Jesus. So here I brought a little bit about the hierarchy of the spirits. It's something that we already studied here on Sunday in the Spirits book. So just for us to remind who Jesus was and who Jesus is. The spirits tell us that we have the imperfect spirits. According to them, they are the spirit that has a propensity to do wrong and is marked by ignorance, pride, selfishness, and all the related evil passions. So like it's a very big group of spirits. They have like 7 or 8 different degrees, and they are still imperfect. Then we have the good spirits, and they say their qualities and power to do good match their degree of perfection. So those spirits are already doing good. They are not perfect, but they're doing most of the time more good things than bad things, and they know what good is, and they know the way, they know how to do that. And we have the pure spirits. They are God's messengers and ministers, the executors of God's will and maintain universal harmony. So who is an example of these spirits that we know? Jesus. So Jesus. So we can imagine like all the problems that usually a mother has concerning an imperfect spirit, like most of us, good spirits, maybe some of us, some of you, at least I'm not included in that, but maybe some of you may be there. So those concerns are not the concerns that Mary had. Those are different concerns that she's having. And not only she, but also Isabel has some concerns. So anybody to read Isabel?
Okay.
Here.
What amazes me is John's temperament, given to the deepest meditation despite his young age, as if his mind is dominated by deep thoughts.
So this is one of the concerns that she has. Imagine a 12-year-old kid, and that kid is always in deepest meditation, the mind dominated by deep thoughts, and that's what concerns her. Like he's always, and do we know why? Maybe why do we meditate? TJ, you can help us with that. What's the importance of meditation?
Well, I think that a lot of times people meditate for like the physical reasons of trying to escape the pain or the world, or but I think in spiritual meditation we're actually looking inward at the reflection of who we are as spirit and finding that connection to God.
So we can say that must be the meditation that John the Baptist was doing. He was connecting himself to God. But imagine a 12-year-old kid doing that. It's not something that we usually see here. And Mary also has her concerns. Mary again, Barbara?
These children, in my view, bring the divine light of a new path to humanity.
So she already knew who those kids were. And by raising Jesus, she knew that. Like she knew he was here to bring the divine light of a new path to humanity. And that was really concerning her about his fate. Why would that be? Why? If I know that my kid is very elevated, is connected to God, and brings this new path to humanity, why would I be concerned about that?
Society will accept her. How will we fit in? Will we be rejected?
Yeah.
Will we suffer?
That's true, because imagine, like, today we're a little more advanced than we were at that time. And we know what happened later to Jesus at that time. So imagine all the concerns that Mary would have. When Jesus was born, she already faced some of the prejudice from society, from the people around her. Imagine, like, when she was seeing Jesus growing up and Jesus' ideas, how she would feel like society would accept him or not. Mary?
Sometimes I find him in deep conversation with travelers heading to Samaria or to the remote villages near the lake. Usually I hear his charitable words towards the washerwoman, the passers-by, to suffering beggars.
So Mary is talking about Jesus. It's not that, sometimes I see Jesus playing soccer over there with some friends, or no, he was doing something that many people didn't do at that time, especially that age. And if we see that, we are going to find it later, for example, in the Sermon on the Mount, what Jesus says here. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. So Jesus was, like everything that Jesus brought to us later in the Sermon on the Mount, he was already doing that since little age. So he was being a living example of all the teachings that he would bring to us some years later. So all those things that today we see, we learn, imagine Mary living that in her daily life, every day seeing this example right there at home, while Jesus was talking to someone he didn't know, to suffering people, bringing comfort to all of them. So all those things that we later on would see with Jesus, she was already seeing that. And what can we say about the mother here? How is it like to be a mother? What can you share with us of this experience?
The same concern as Mary, like the deep meditation, the path about children.
But how do you think motherhood is? Especially according to this Spiritist view, what do you think it is?
I think it's a beautiful mission, not an easy one, but a beautiful one.
So, Isabel?
Despite the failures of faith, we, mothers, always have our spirits shaken by unwarranted fears.
Do you, mothers?
Oh, yeah.
It's important to see, like Isabel, imagine for her to be the mother of John the Baptist, she was already an elevated spirit. So she had that faith that many of the mothers at that time didn't have. And even though she tells us she had her spirit shaken, those fears that she had. So it was normal. It's normal, mothers, for us. So this lesson is interesting because Humberto de Campos, even though the name of the chapter is Jesus and the Precursor, most of the time, at least half of the chapter, Humberto de Campos is talking about the mothers. So it's bringing a lesson for us to how are these concerns of the mother, how is this mission of the mother. So it's important because even though he's talking about John the Baptist in the chapter, he's talking here at least this first half of the chapter about the mothers, like these two examples of mothers that we have, Mary and Isabel. And if you go to the Spirit's book, the questions 385, we see that the Spirit say that the love of a mother for her children is believed to be the greatest love one being can have for another. That's why many times we compare, like we see Jesus as a father in the Bible, God as a father in the Bible. Jesus talks about God as a father, but Spiritism brings to us that God can also be our mother, because we know that love that we here on earth know as the love from a mother, and it's like they change this view that we have. Like since the beginning of the times, we always see God as this man, of this very tough father, and then they say and come here and say that we can see God at the same time as this loving mother. And the Spirit's book also says that in the human race, the maternal love, lasts for a lifetime and assumes a character of selfless devotion, raising it to a virtue. Is that right, Mother? Is that right?
Yeah, it's very unconditional.
So now, let's see about Jesus' connection with God. Mary again.
The ease with which he used his line of reasoning to answer the questions that were presented by the teachers of the temple left us all nervous and perplexed. His science cannot be of this world. It comes from God that certainly manifests itself through his pure lips.
So here Mary and Isabel, they keep talking, and then Mary is talking about what happened some days ago. It was after Jesus was presented at the temple. So we know from the stories from Luke that Jesus was there at the temple and he did exactly this that Mary is saying. He started to answer some questions from the doctors of the law, and they were all perplexed because his knowledge was very different. Like he was saying some things that even the doctors of the law, they have no idea of what was happening, where the knowledge come from. And here Mary says that even them, like Mary and Joseph, they were perplexed too. And when she says right this science cannot be of this world. Let's see again the Spirit's book and what we already studied here on Sunday. When we see it's not of this world, what are the kinds of world that we have? And the Spirit explains to us we have the primitive ones. The primitive ones, like our first incarnation as human beings, we are incarnated in a primitive world, like is the most basic one. And then we have the world of, as we grow and the planet also evolve, we have the world of trials and expiation. This is the world where we are right now. Planet Earth is a trial and expiation. Then it goes to a regenerative world. We are in this transition. We are not there yet, but we are going to achieve this world very soon. Then we have the happy world, and we have the heavenly or the divine world. So where are we here? We are still here. Like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different categories. We are in the second one. And Jesus, in order for Jesus to be perfect, Jesus he had already lived in this one where we are right now, this one, and that one. So Jesus already lived in all those worlds. That's why she says his science cannot be of this world. And yes, it is not. It is something that until today, we don't understand. Many of the teachings, many of the parables, we read and you read again. For example, this year we have the study of the parables in Central Park. Last year we had it again, and many times on Sunday when we study the Gospel according to Spiritism, we study the parables. And every time we read, it's like we are reading it for the first time, because we can see different layers, we can see different teachings, because it's not from this world. We can, even if we understand, we can't put everything into practice, because we are not there yet. But Jesus was, and Jesus is. And so just imagine, for example, today we talk a lot about indigo children, or we talk about crystal kids, those kids that we say, many of them, they are more intelligent, like they are more elevated in the intellectual side, in the moral side, and when they come here and we see that one of those kids are very different from us, more elevated than us, we already say, wow, that kid is very different. This kid is coming from another place. And for sure, those kids are not coming from a heavenly or divine world as Jesus was. So imagine if we could see Jesus as a kid, as a 12-year-old right now. We would be perplexed as Mary and John and Joseph and Isabel, they were. And also about this connection with God, like when she says that God manifests itself through his pure lips. Because we know he's a perfect spirit, he's the closest possible to God. And as John says, like Jesus says here in John 10:30, I and my Father are one. Just one moment. And it's important that through many years and still today, many religions read that and believe that, as Jesus said that, it means that Jesus was God himself. So Jesus and God, they are one and the same person. But what Jesus was telling here, he was telling that he already achieved that perfection, and everything that he said, everything that the way he acted, he was acting according to what God wanted us to act, the way that God wants us to be one day. That's why, because he thought his speech, everything was very connected to God. He was connected to God 24/7, something that for us is very difficult to understand, because many times, at least for me, it's difficult when I'm going through a tough moment to wait, to pray for a minute or for 5 minutes and to stop and to try to connect with God. Imagine Jesus being connected with God all the time and like living according to God's will. So that's why he and his Father and our Father, they are one. And Mary could see that. Mary could see that through his lips. Like all the things he used to say, he was like God speaking through him. And as we saw, she was concerned about Jesus' future. Mary?
I thought of his unprotected childhood, and I feared for his future. I saw of Eleazar in order for him to intercede for Jesus through his valuable relationships with the temple's authorities.
So here, Eleazar was one of the doctors of the law. So Mary went to the synagogue and she talked to him because, of course, if we see a kid that is very morally and intellectually elevated and talks about God all the time and he's very connected to God, the first thing that she thought was, okay, he needs to be a religious person. So let's go, let me talk to the doctor of the law and to see if he can accept Jesus there. At least through many years, the same happened in the Catholic Church, the same happened today in many different religions. And if a mother or father, especially with the Catholic Church, during many years, the mothers and the fathers, they wanted their kids to be priests, to become a nun. And maybe Mary was thinking about that. Okay, so Jesus talks so much about God's law, God's love. So the best thing for him, for his future, is to go through that path.
I was worried about preparing him adequately for life.
And every mother, every father worry about that. For example, if we see that a kid is very, very smart. Let's suppose our kid is very, very smart. What do you want for him or for her? Yeah, want to go to best school, to have the best college, to become a good professional. So it's natural. All the parents, they want the best to their kids, and the same was happening to Mary. And here we see about in the book Family Constellation that we study here on Wednesday, Joana de Angelis also talks about these concerns in the family. Now I need someone to be Joana de Angelis. Can you, Teresa?
Life is not improvisation. It's the result of superior planning and needs to be led with serenity and confidence. To this end, moral discipline and conduct of the partners, whether together or not, is the utmost relevance for the family foundation. So
we see here, I just read some parts of how Humberto de Campos talks about that, because he talks about just to explain, while Mary and Isabel, they are talking, Joseph is working. And later on, Joseph comes back to their home, but all the time, Humberto de Campos used the love loving, use serenity, for example. There's one sentence here that Humberto de Campos says, the wood shop was already closed, and Joseph sought the serenity of the home's interior for rest. So you can see that Mary and Joseph, they are very close to each other. It's a loving family, and it's a serene place. So home is a temple there. So we see Jesus, Mary, and Joseph living in a temple, like the way as Joanna de Angelis says here. And now, at this time, we have Jesus talking in the story, because she was telling Isabel about that she was worried about that, and then Jesus comes and talks to her. So who wants to be Jesus?
Well, I want, but I am already.
Philip?
Mother, what do you want from me? Haven't I been the testimony of my fellowship with the Father in heaven?
So Jesus knew that his mother was concerned. He could feel that. And he comes to Mary and asks that. What do you want from me? Because he was already being that example. He was already living, being that example that God wanted him to be here.
Mother, all useful and generous preparation in this world is precious, but I'm already with God. My Father, however, wishes that we exemplify all that is good. Thus, I will choose the best school.
So we see here that he says to Mary, okay, all the generous preparation and useful preparation is precious, so it's okay to be concerned. He understands that Mary wanted him to go to the best place, to the best school, to go to the temple, to learn with the doctors of the law. He's okay with that. He sees why she's doing that. But at the same time, he says, I'm already with God, meaning that all the knowledge I already have. So there's nothing he's going to learn in the temple, he's going to learn with the doctors of the law that he doesn't know. I mean, he knew way more than that. So we see here, like, we all are here to learn, to evolve, to progress, but Jesus wasn't here for that. We know that Jesus was here on the other side to teach us. So that's why he says, I'm already with God. And he says what God wants him to do. Not only him, but all his family. Because he doesn't, here he's saying, I'm already with God, but here he used the we. So my Father, however, wishes that we exemplify all that which is good. So he and Mary and Joseph as a family, God wanted them to be an example to us, to be an example here on earth. And here he's saying that. And that's why he's going to choose the best school. Any ideas, any thoughts? What's that school?
Harvard.
Yeah.
Let's go to that school right now. So what's Jesus' choice? Mary?
On the same day, Jesus approached Joseph and humbly asked him to be admitted into his line of work.
So he could choose any school that he wanted, and he chose to stay at home working with his father, learning with his father, in his family environment. So the best school according to Jesus is the family, is the home. That's the best place for us to learn.
Honoring our father and mother does not only entail respecting them, it also means assisting them in their need.
So it's from the gospel according to Spiritism. So we see here that Jesus was honoring his father and his mother by choosing to stay there, to be with Joseph and to learn with Joseph. He was respecting them and he was assisting them in all their needs that they have, because Joseph, of course, I think he must need someone by his side in his works. So Jesus was also helping his father, helping his mother, and being an example to all his family or to all the ones around them.
as if he wanted to teach us that the best will for God is home and self-effort.
So we have home and we have self-effort. It's important, like I always like to say, like the name of this Spirit Center is Inner Enlightenment. Like this inner enlightenment is self-effort that it's up to us to do our part. Like we come here to the center, we're not waiting for some miracle to happen in our lives. We don't think that, at least we didn't, we weren't supposed to think that by receiving passes or drinking the water, we're going to be saved or we're going to receive everything that we need. No, we need to have this inner transformation. We need to have this self-effort. And Jesus was already teaching that. And here again, João de Angelis.
Family is the foundation upon which society's immense building is erected. Family Constellation, Joanna de Angelis.
And it's beautiful in the book, Family Constellation, Joanna de Angelis, she explains exactly like that. And she goes from the family, like from our, the parents and the kids and the relatives and to the neighbors, to the friends. And like this family begins like in this inner circle, in this small circle, and then it goes bigger and bigger, and we can see ourselves as the humanity, as a family as well. But to be able one day to see the whole humanity as one family, we need to start doing our part in our home, in our life, like the place where we were, we reincarnated. That's why he's teaching that to us. And then, now this is Humberto de Campos talking to us. Who wants to be Humberto de Campos? Diego?
Yeah, sure. His small index finger pointed out to John the landscapes that multiplied in the distance. As a great general would explain the details of his plans to a trustworthy soldier.
Because now Humberto de Campos says, okay, Mary and Isabel, they were talking and they see that it was already becoming later and darker outside. And where is John and where is Jesus? They go outside and they see the two of them right there in the top of like a small mountain, a small place. And Jesus was pointing some places to John. And why they were doing that? Because let's think about this family, like we said, the family constellation, about reincarnating in a family, and exactly what we are studying on Sunday about the planning, how to plan our incarnation. We know that it's not by chance that we come to a family, we come to this life like, okay, you need to reincarnate, go there. No, we have a planning, and we have like our guides, the high elevated spirits that help us to plan that with us. So imagine for us, may have some months, years of planning, but for Jesus, we know from the books by Emmanuel that it wasn't like that. It wasn't just, okay, Jesus needs to come here to earth, let's stay doing 10 years planning Jesus' incarnation. No, it wasn't like that. It was like at least 1,000 years for Jesus to be able to come here, and it was something that was planning since the beginning, that one day Jesus would come here to teach us, to be this model and guide as the Spirit's book bring to us. And John, of course, John was in his plans. John wasn't chosen at the last minute. Okay, Jesus is here, I have that cousin, okay, come here and let work together. No, they already knew what they were doing. And here, when Humberto de Campos says that Jesus and sees Jesus as a great general, it's interesting because like a great general explaining to the soldier this comparison, because we know that Jesus is the governor of our planet. And it's like John was really a soldier, was someone who came here before Jesus, like 6 months before Jesus, but his work here, he started his work some years before Jesus to build this path to Jesus. So they were talking to each other, like we don't know, Humberto de Campos doesn't say what they were talking about, but he's like just by reading the way they were talking, seeing them, he could say that it was like they were seeing like the landscape, all the place they lived here, and because here we have all the places where many of the the main stories from the gospel happen. So it's like as they were planning what was going to happen in the next years. And Humberto de Campos also says that.
We would assume that this was the first union on earth between love and truth for the conquest of the world.
So because we know that, and he reinforces here that Jesus represents the love, and John the Baptist represents the truth. Like John the Baptist, he came before Jesus because he was here to bring, especially to the doctors of the law, to the religious ones at the time, the truth that Jesus was later on going to exemplify through with his love. That's why he says that John the Baptist is the law, the truth, and Jesus is the love, and it is, according to Humberto de Campos, like the first time that the two of them were together planning how they were going to conquest the world. Here. And after that, they go to sleep. In the next day, they wake up and...
On the next day, Isabel and John were leaving the house, and she asked his nephew, "Don't you want to come with us?" And the little carpenter from Nazareth prophetically replied with profound kindness, "John will leave first."
Yeah, so here we see like Jesus, 12-year-old Jesus, just saying like, can be something normal. Do you want to come? No, he's going to be first. We can see that through many different ways, but Humberto de Campos, he sees that. And of course, in the school of the gospel where they are, someone may have explained that to them. Like John will leave first, meaning that John will be the first one to go to open this path to Jesus, and years later, Jesus would go and do his work here. So now we know that John is the truth. Humberto de Campos again.
Like the pain that precedes the powerful manifestations of light within the heart, it, the truth, receives the plain block of marble and chisels away its roughness, so that the labor of love emerges in its divine purity.
So we know that it wasn't easy for John the Baptist to be here and to open this path to Jesus. He, in the end of his life, he went to prison because he could say things to the doctors of the law and to the kings that they didn't want to hear. And the last thing that happened to him, he was murdered, he was killed, he was beheaded. So it wasn't something easy for him. He was already having a very heavy cross he already had a very heavy cross to carry.
John was the truth, and in his task of refinement, truth tore him apart and hurt him, as he allowed himself to make extreme sacrifices. Herod and his wife represent political conventionalism and personal interests. Salome, our dancer, represents the futility of the world.
Yeah, because here he is explaining what happened to John the Baptist, like before how he died. Né? So we have the king Herod and his wife, and actually his wife used to be the wife of his brother, and they were living together, and John the Baptist, he was criticizing them because of that. He said it wasn't something that they should do, it wasn't the right thing to do, and so he asked John the Baptist, he asked the soldiers to put John the Baptist to prison. And he was there in prison, and one day they were having this party, and his stepdaughter, that is Salome, I think? Salome. Is Salome that says in English? Yeah. Okay, Salome, she was a dancer, so she was dancing to him. He saw her dancing. He was very excited. He loved the way she was dancing, and she asked him what she wanted, and she said that she wanted the John's head in a to give her, and so that's how John the Baptist died and how he was killed. So here we can see that it was an extreme sacrifice. And if we see in the spirit, with a spiritist view, we can see that we know that John the Baptist was the reincarnation of Elijah. And what Elijah used to do in the past, he used to do exactly the same thing that John the Baptist, the way that John the Baptist died. So it was a sacrifice. Maybe he was the one who chose that. He said, okay, I want to suffer the way I made so many people suffer. We don't know. Maybe that's what's happened.
I thought Elijah was a prophet.
He was.
He was.
Yeah.
But he was a soldier too, a big general. And he commanded his armies to behead people when he captured them.
And here we also see that Humberto de Campos says that John the Baptist is the laborer of the first hour.
John expressed the strict discipline that precedes the spontaneity of love.
Yeah, and first, before talking about this one, let's just see the laborer of the first hour, or the worker of the first hour. And we have the parable of the worker of the last hour. So it's interesting to see that usually when we read the parable, we see ourselves as the workers of the last hour. And we see here that Humberto de Campos is saying that John was the worker of the first hour. So if it weren't for his work, we wouldn't be here able to do the work that we are doing, the work that we all are trying to do here. And now when he says here, what I thought very interesting here, when they say that John expressed the strict discipline that precedes the spontaneity of love. Because it shows us that love is not something that easy, it's not something that we are born knowing how to love from, especially we were talking about the mothers, and many ways many mothers, they suffer a pressure to love their kids since the day they were born, and we see many mothers that have depression after the kids are born, because many of them, they say that they don't feel that love, they don't feel that thing that they are supposed to feel, and the same can happen to parents or the kids that don't love the father or the mother, because love isn't something that easy, isn't something that we're born knowing how to love. We cannot say that we love everybody around us, everybody in our family, everybody in our work. And here Humberto de Campos says that we need this strict discipline before loving becomes something very easy in our lives. And John the Baptist, he expressed that. So for me it's interesting, that's why I highlighted that, because it tells us that, okay, if we don't know how to love someone today, like we see in the gospel, to love our enemies, and many times we struggle with that. How am I supposed to love an enemy, to love someone who made me suffer, someone who betrayed me? But it's not the same love that we have for our loved one, for our spouses, for example. It's just not wishing evil, wishing bad things to that person. It's the first step. And by doing that first step, one day we'll be able to have this spontaneity of love. But it's important for us to know that love is also something that we are learning how to do.
John is the first sign of the active Christian at war with his own imperfections in his inner world in order to establish within himself the sanctuary of his accomplishment with Christ.
So here we see that John is at war with his own imperfections. So we saw that Jesus was a perfect spirit, someone who came from a divine world, but John was not. John was still someone, of course I can't say he was someone just like us, because he was way more elevated than us, But he was someone who was still evolving, who was here on earth, is still struggling with his own imperfections. And when he says here, to establish within himself the sanctuary of his accomplishments with Christ, this is about that inner temple, that inner sanctuary that we talk a lot in Spiritism, that we need to have that within us. When Jesus said, go to the temple and pray, it is go to a quiet place and pray. It is like for us to have this quiet place inside of us. And again, with meditation, as John and Jesus, we saw they used to do, the same we can do. So it's something that John was still learning how to do. He was still in this process. And so he can be this example for us, how to be in this process. Of course, we need to see Jesus as an example, but John can be this example because he was an imperfect spirit as we are. So we can see by his efforts what are the efforts that we can do in our lives too. And now the way that Humberto de Campos ends the chapter is saying exactly like this sentence.
Of the sons of women, John the Baptist is the greatest of all.
And I confess, when I read this last sentence, let me just read it all for you, or it's better, let's ask Diego to... Can read this expressing. It's the same thing that we read, but so we can read everything.
Okay. Expressing the strict discipline that precedes the spontaneity of love, the struggle that breaks apart the shadows of the pathway, John is the first sign of the active Christian at war with his own imperfections in his inner world, in order to establish within himself the sanctuary of his accomplishment with Christ. It was for that reason that Jesus said of him, of the sons of women, John the Baptist is the greatest of all.
And I confess that when I read that, I was saying, okay, but Jesus said of the son of women, John the Baptist was the greatest of all. And what about Jesus? Jesus was the son of who? So we saw that Mary was a woman, so Jesus was also the son of a woman. So why did Jesus talk about that about John and doesn't include himself in that? And then I stay like 1 day, 2 days thinking about that and thinking about that again and again and again. And then I came to this passage of John. And does anybody wants to read for us? TJ?
Very truly, I tell you, no one can see the kingdom of God unless they are born again. How can someone be born when they are old? Nicodemus asked. Surely they cannot enter a second time into their mother's womb to be born. Jesus answered, very truly I tell you, no one can enter the kingdom of God unless they are born of water and the Spirit. Flesh gives birth to flesh, but the Spirit gives birth to spirit. John chapter 3.
Yeah. Just saying this John is John the Evangelist, not the same John we are talking about, yeah. Yeah. But when I read that and when I made this connection, I thought maybe he was trying to say that, okay, we have like those people here on earth that they need to be born again. And as we saw John was a person, he's still imperfect, so he needed to be born again. So he needed to be what? To be a son of a woman again. He needed to come here in order to evolve. Jesus wasn't at that level. Jesus didn't need to be here to evolve. That's why one day I saw I was interviewing actually Julio Padovan from SGNY, and he made a very good comparison that I never thought about. He said that we all here, we need to reincarnate, but we can't say that Jesus reincarnated here. We say that Jesus incarnate because he didn't need to reincarnate again. Like he wasn't in that stage that he was still evolving, but if we see John the Baptist, he was. So that's why Jesus was saying, among all the ones here on earth that still need to evolve, still need to reincarnate in order to become a better person, John the Baptist is the greatest of all. So Jesus doesn't say among all the spirits in the universe. He doesn't say about everyone I know. No, he says about everyone that is here right now at this moment, John the Baptist is the greatest of all. So Humberto de Campos, he finishes his chapter, this second chapter, talking about that. And I think it's very important for us to see that, okay, John the Baptist was still evolving, was still in perfect spirits, spirit as we all still are here. And we can see him as another example, because usually we see Jesus as our example, and Jesus is a perfect spirit, and many people can say, okay, but Jesus is perfect, for him it was easy to come here and to act the way he acted. But we see that John the Baptist wasn't perfect. He was struggling, and we see like Mary too, we see Isabel too, we see like this example of family here, a family that has their struggles together, and we can see them as an example of a family, like Jesus, John, Joseph, Mary, and Isabel. And we can see, especially as this chapter is about John the Baptist, we can see John the Baptist as an example to all of us, an example how we can deal with our inner struggles, how we can deal with our imperfections, and a way for us to do our road or our path to one day become perfect as Jesus is. That's great. Thank you for your attention.